So today we are going to make this social media shot where the iPhone is rotating in an area where all these social media logos are swirling around. I've already brought in the iPhone right over here, and I've also brought in the social media icons, which you can get on Gumroad for free. First off, what we got to do is make sure that all of these are floating. So I'm going to select all of those, press M, new collection, and call it social media. I will add a cube. I will go to the geometry nodes editor, press new. We should probably give this a bit of a bigger size. So I'm going to add a transform geometry, plug it in there, increase the scale to something very wild. Then I will add a distribute points in volume, and you won't be able to see anything that's happening because we have to turn this into a volume first. So mesh to volume, plug it in there, and you can see our points being distributed. We don't need that many, so I'm going to set this to 0.01, and maybe this is a bit better for our vision. It can even be less, 0.001. I think this should be enough. Let's go ahead and plug in an instance on points, plug it right over there. Bring in the social media group, set it to relative, separate children, reset children, instance into the instance, and pick instance. And right now we have all of these social media icons floating around. However, I don't like the rotation of this, so we gotta add a align Euler to vector. Deprecate it. So it's align rotation to vector, into the rotation. And if we play around with this, you can already see that the social media icons will be displaced in a way that we would like. And now they should actually rotate around. And the way that we're going to do it actually is by adding a rotate instances right over here. Now rotate the Y value. All of these are rotating around. But there is a slight problem because some of them should be moving slower than others, and we also want the rotation to start randomly. Now they are pretty uniform and we don't actually want that. So what I'm going to add is a random value node. Random value, set it to vector. Value into the rotation. We want to separate the values because they shouldn't really move around on all vectors. So what you can do is set all of this to 0 except for this one, and then they will be rotated around in a different manner. Now, if we want to have access to this in order to animate it properly, what we can do is add a separate XYZ, combine XYZ. And in this case, it should be the Y. And the reason why it's the Y, by the way, is because of the rotation that it had initially, probably because of the transform that was already active on the social media icons. No problem, we can just work with the Y value, it doesn't really matter that much for us. So right now we have separated this, we should plug this into the max. And if we now take a value node and plug it into this vector, and play around with it, then everything should start to rotate around. The trick is basically to have this move quite slowly, something like this, and maybe that will look a bit more cool. But before we actually animate this, I want to make sure that we have a camera that can rotate around. So I'm going to bring in a curve, so Shift A, curve, circle, and I will bring it right over here. It should be pretty big, like this. And click on the camera right here from the collection, go to the object constraints and set it to follow path. Click this curve with the picker icon. And now our camera should be on the curve, but it's not because it has location data. So set the location to 0, and now it should be on the curve. Naturally, we also want to make sure that the camera is following this iPhone. So what I'm going to do is add another constraint called the track tool. Track tool, we should use the picker tool once again and select our empty, for example. And now, as you can see, if we play around with the offset, it will always be focused on this iPhone. And that already looks pretty darn cool if you ask me. I'm going to add an HDRI real quick. So let's first make our camera animation. Now let's open up the timeline, bring this up. Let's go to frame 1, and maybe we want to decrease the focal length in this case, make it seem a little bit bigger, so if there's a lot of icons right there. And we can go to the object constraints, set this to whatever value you would like to begin at, something like right over here maybe, press I. And I want this to continue for approximately, let's say 4 seconds. So I'm going to set it to 96. Then I'm going to offset this, and I want it to rotate this way, like so, press I. And all we got to do now is make sure that we have a backplane that can support the background for this. So I'm going to increase the scale of this plane all the way over here and make sure it's not really visible at the bottom, something like this, because now we can drag those ones upwards, E and Z, take this and take that, go back into object mode, Control A, apply the scale, Control B on those very edges, and make sure to increase the segments by a bunch. Let's go into the camera. I'm going to camera, viewport display, and increase the passepartout. And now we can only see what's inside of the camera. Of course, I also want to make sure that we have some depth of field. It's actually by clicking on the camera, going to depth of field, enabling it, and selecting the very same empty that we've got on the iPhone model. And now if we decrease the f-stop, some will be out of focus, some will be in focus, and that is exactly what we want. Now, of course, the lighting and the background don't look very interesting as of yet. So I'm going to select this background and I will give it a texture. Maybe we want this to be a bit more pinkish. I'm actually going to bring in a area lamp. And the area lamp should be pointed towards our iPhone, increase the strength like this. And now at least the iPhone is starting to look a bit better. I'm going to duplicate this, Alt-R, RY 90. It's pointing in the wrong direction, RY 180. And that should be fine. I'm going to move it on this side, S and Z, scale it upwards so we can cover the entire side of the iPhone right there. Now for the social media icons, something very different should happen. We should bring in a area lamp. I'm going to scale this up, and this one has to be very powerful, by the way. So I'm going to press R, Y, and 90, and that will rotate it towards that side. I'll bring it to the side, R and Y, maybe rotate it ever so slightly, and increase the power by a whole lot. That is a lot. So let's select the back plane for now, and Control 3, let's give it a subdivision because I see these harsh edges and I don't like that. Just make sure that in the animation we always have a background. So if you move to the beginning of this timeline, and I now realize that I didn't place any keyframes. Did I place keyframes? And now the camera should move around, but we don't have a background in the beginning, and that's a problem that should be solved. So R and Z until it kind of fits, then move to the background, and now it seems like we have a background the entire way around. Right now, let's animate the icons. So let's go back to the geometry nodes editor. Let's turn this upwards and go over to our value node right over here. Let's click on it. Let's go to frame 0 and let's set this to 1. Then let's go to the final frame and increase this so it actually moves. Press I. Let's select all of this. T, linear. So now it is moving around like this, and that makes it seem very cool. Now, the camera in motion should probably be linear as well. So let's make it linear. And what I want to have happen is that right over here, maybe at near the end point of this, there should be one icon that is going to cover the entire camera, and we can transition to another shot in that fashion. And I'm going to take, let's say, the YouTube logo, which would be appropriate for my channel. I'm going to duplicate it right over here and make sure that it's not in this collection. So place it in the other collection. And this YouTube logo, I want to make sure that it's in the camera view right over there, RX 90, and it should cover and remove the entire animation from there on out. Because from this swiping area, we can basically change. So from right over here, we're going to mask this away, and then we have another shot going right there. There's maybe one thing that I want to do, and that is go back to the value node, and we're actually going to make it less extreme. I'm going to delete this keyframe, going to frame, let's say 20, and I will increase the value of this just a little bit. So like somewhere over here. And now it is rotating, but now we can play around with it. So let's go into the graph editor. Let's open this up. Default value. Let's open this. This shouldn't be linear, so I'm going to set it to interpolation mode Bezier. Actually, we want it to be faster at certain points and slower at others. So I'm going to set this to individual centers. Press A, S, and X, and we can scale this upwards. And right now, you will be able to see that it is having a slight motion like that. But it needs to continue. So I'm going to click on this, go to modifiers, click on cycles, set repeat motion to repeat with offset. And now let's see what happens. It's coming to a full halt, and we don't actually want that. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it upwards. I'm going to take this as well and drag it upwards just a little bit. And now it should always be rotating. If that is not the case, then we did something wrong. So let's go over here. Let's click on this. Repeat with offset also from the beginning. Let's make it a bit more like this, and this one should go inwards a little bit more. Now, there's only one thing that I don't really like about this, and that is that they are all moving at the same time. The animation is happening at the same time to all the different objects. So I'm going to bring in a scene time. I'm going to remove this value, bring in the frame into the vector, and now it's going crazy, basically. So I'm going to add a math node in between here, set it to multiply, and I want to have this be a bit slower, so 0.1, and now it is rotating around real slowly. But I also want to keep this value that we already keyframed, and I'm going to add a random value as well. I'm going to set the random value to 0 to 0.1, and maybe this can be 0.003. 3 value into the value. And now all of those will be rotating in a different speed than what we had before. So this one is a bit slower than some in the background, and I think that looks a bit better. Now we lose the privilege of changing the value in this. So that's just something that you have to deal with. You can either change the animation or you can change the speed of either of those. And I'm going for this one because I like it better this way. And let's see what it looks like. And now if you want to get fancy, you can give the camera an animation if you'd like. So let's go into the camera, go to the graph editor. Let's have a look at the follow path. We can set it to Bezier, and maybe you want it to begin fast in the beginning. Let's have a look at this in a different vision. Fast in the beginning. And then it's slowing down and transitioning into the other shot. Naturally, if you want more icons on this, you can increase the density on our distribute points in volume. So we can set it to 0.003, for example, and you would have a lot more. Be careful with this. You don't want your PC to explode. So I'm going to set it to 0.001, and that will be fine for what I am trying to do. Of course, if you want to have this rotate in the opposite direction as well, you can change the random value to a minus value. So let's say we're going to set it to minus 0.3. Then they will be moving in separate directions, as you can see right here. So this one is moving clockwise and this one is moving counterclockwise. So if you want to have that effect as well, no problem, you can absolutely do that. So I've made the background black because I think it fits better with the rest of the renders we've made. All of those renders are pretty dark or white, so I think that the blue background was a bit too much. Either way, all we have to do now is make sure that this iPhone is coming from below the screen. What we actually want to do is create a new empty for this camera. So I'm going to place the 3D cursor right over there where it's already located at. I will press on Shift A, empty. And I will bring in a cone. Let's do a cone for a change. I'm going to select the camera, go over to the object constraints, and instead of empty 001, I am going to select our cone. We can now animate the iPhone as well. So on frame 20, I'm going to press K, and I will add location, rotation, and scale. And then I will go downwards all the way to frame 0, let's say. I will bring this over here. And as a matter of fact, I want to rotate it the way around like this. So there's a bit more congruency between our different shots. Okay, location, rotation, and scale, and then it is moving upwards like that. But we should probably check whether this animation looks any good. So let's go over into the graph editor. Let's select this. Let's do the Z location first. I'm going to select that one. And maybe we want it to be quicker in the beginning, since the camera is also moving very quick in the beginning. So like this. Ooh. Go over to the x-axis, so x Euler rotation. And let's basically do the same. See what it does. Ooh, that looks pretty nice. Very nice. Now the only thing I want to change is the Z Euler rotation because I want it to continue doing its thing. So modifiers, cycles, repeat motion with offset. And now it should continue to move, but we can see no screen. So we're going right over here to the screen LED, go to the shader editor, plug this into the emission once again, set this to 1 at the very least. Maybe it should be a bit more. We can also go into the screen glass and make it a bit less on the vector. So something like this. So now if it is playing around, let's turn motion blur on and let's render this out. I'm going to keep it like this for now. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, click on subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.
I get the money and it's right on cue. Keep the duffel bag up inside my coupe. Hold a couple racks, tell them I love you. You wanna be a boss, do it like I do.